Guess it's just me and you for now. Against the world, against the world. Me and you for now. Against the world, against the world.
My name is Morgan Page. I'm a DJ, remixer, and producer based here in Los Angeles. And I've been making electronic music for about 15 years. I feel really fortunate to be able to do it for a job and to travel the world. So, I've played everywhere from India to China to Brazil, across North America, Australia. The MPP 3D tour was sort of the first time anyone has ever taken a 3D tour on the road for a full tour. It was cool to try something new and pioneer it and put a lot of your own money into something, really invest in the show. And I wanted to do something different and stand out. So we brought 3D LED panels, packed it in a semi-truck, and brought it across North America for 55 shows in 2 months. So crazy tour and really cool payoff just seeing people react to the visuals like this. To have the visuals work in concert with the music like this. 3D was definitely a challenge. It was a lot of work. It took about 30 animators to do all the visuals. But it's cool because it's actually going to change the way I do music. It may change the way that I compose. And, almost like you're scoring a movie, you need to create custom music for the show. So for the intro and outro and things like that, I did custom pieces of music from scratch. So it's a whole new approach, a whole new way of thinking about your show. For me, DJing and producing both work hand in hand, and you can't just do one. They both feed into each other. So to create music, is great, but you've got to test it out. You got to play in a loud club where people are drunk and dropping their drinks and yelling and stuff. So you need to have that road experience, and then you need that still quiet time when you're back in the studio to focus. I don't work so well on the road, so maybe I'll get drafts done, or maybe I'll make mix tweaks on the road, but the bulk of the creative time is back home in the studio when I can focus and sort of block out the world. So a while ago, a friend of mine, Tommy Trash, who's an amazing DJ and producer from Australia, he's recently gotten really big in the US. I was talking to him about producing in Ableton, and we were both kind of sharing plugin tips, and I was asking, what limiter do you use on your bus? Sorry, Tom, I gotta share the secret. And he was like, I use the Sonnox stuff. I use the reverb, I use the EQ, and I use the limiter on the master. So it was a brand, I didn't know a lot about Sonnox before, and I got into it, and now they are my go-to plugins. There's so many choices out there right now. You really have to have good bread and butter plugins, ones that you can reach to, and I don't have any time to tinker with 20 different EQs and compressors and limiters and be A-Bing the results. I need to kind of get those results really quickly. And if it doesn't work, I remove the plugin from the folder. So it's like, I have to get in, work quickly, move on. And I think that's what would really appeal to me about the Sonnox stuff was ease of use, kind of simplicity, and be able to get the result and move forward.
All right, today I'm going to show you a bunch of tips on how I use kind of my go-to Sonnox plugins. Right now on all my sessions, pretty much using the reverb, the EQ, the transmod, and the limiter. But we're going to start with transmod. I'm going to show you how I use it on arpeggios and kind of plucky synth sequences. So this is a song in progress. I'm working on my next album, and I'm sort of doing draft-a-days, doing one concept a day, sort of speed writing. And I go through, I compose a beat, chord progression, basic melody, and try to wrap that up and then send that to vocalists. So this is a real basic idea, and I'm just going to go explore how I'm using the Sonnox plugins individually on these different elements of the draft. So this is an arpeggio that I'm going to play here. And that's sort of driving the beat forward. It's already pretty punchy, but I wanted to kind of use transmod to really accentuate the pluck and the pick of the attack. So I'm going to pull up transmod. Right now it's a neutral position. It's already pretty sort of a plucky sound anyways, and I like to pick, I really think it's important to pick the right source sounds. So it's hard to add pluck if a sound doesn't have any attack to it. But sometimes its sound is too plucky, and sometimes you want to reduce that, and sometimes you want to accentuate that. So with this, we're going to listen to both ways. So that's pushing it, that's adding more attack. That's removing the attack right there. So now it's one of my favorite ways to add a little more snap to a kick, to an arpeggio, to ride cymbals if they need a little more attack, if they're sounding soft. And I can kind of use that to take an element and make it softer for more contrast. Because if everything's snappy, there's not really going to be that organic contrast between the elements, and it's just going to pile together on it and be firing at the same time. There's a lot of other stuff happening on here. There's pads, there's other leads, and I want that arpeggio to stand out and not get totally lost. I'm also using the Sonnox reverb. I'm using it to take a very mono bass sound that has a lot of mid-range content and really kind of expand that, just so you can hear the bass more and get more of a room sound to it. There's a mid-range sound coming from Massive. There's already a little reverb within Massive, but you can hear how it's expanding the image with the Sonnox reverb on there. So it's adding a little bit of a tail, and then that tail is getting sidechained a little bit. So I'm just trying to make it pump a little more with the beat and create a little more ambiance. So I'm going to exaggerate that a little bit so you can hear it a little more. So that's with the reverb kind of pushed up a little harder, and then without it. Back with it. And that's an important technique for me to make stuff sound louder, to create that perception of loudness, that there's reverb, that it's sort of pushing air in the room. So, I'll use distortions for that. I'll use EQ to kind of highlight the mid-range where the ear is most sensitive. And I'll use reverb to really push that sound like the sound is shouting in a room. So moving along on this draft song that I have for you, I'm using the EQ, the Sonnox EQ, especially as a high pass, and pretty much on the master, I want to get rid of the really low stuff below 20 hertz. Sometimes I'll go as high as 25. Some people go as high as 30. I think that's kind of pushing it, and I'm using it to get a little. I'm using it to get a little more headroom because there's a lot of this low subsonic stuff that is kind of crowding the mix. And it's a little subtle. You can't hear it directly there, but I can see that I'm getting a sort of snappier, punchier mix. It's a little bit louder. And I'm also boosting a little bit, just to get a little more high-end EQ. And where is that? It's about at 14K, just to get a little sparkle in the mix that's lost during some of the compression. And rolling off a little of the highs, a little of that really high stuff, about 18.5K. So don't really need piercing highs on there, especially with digital stuff. So that provides a little more clarity, a little more loudness. And now some of the most important elements of the mix, is how you're using the limiters. So the most important way on this mix, I've put the limiters at the end of the chain after the EQ, and I'm pushing it pretty hard. I'm adding a lot of gain here, a lot of makeup gain. And on the Oxford limiter, obviously the input is sort of setting your threshold level. That's one of the things I really like, is that you have that simplicity. You have less knobs to work with. So I'll play with the attack a bit, depending on the sound I want. Sometimes I have the attack super fast. Other times I want to hear more of the attack of the kick, so I'll put that in there. And I'll just be looking to see how much gain reduction I'm getting. And you can push the Oxford limiter pretty hard. You know, maybe 6 dB. I might push it that far. It depends on what I want for the song, what kind of flavor. And sometimes I want it really subtle. Maybe I only want 2 or 3 where it's just kissing the meters. That's getting about 5 dB of gain reduction on there. Really important thing on there is the enhance curve. I usually have it at 80. Some people think I'm crazy because that's really pushing it, but I really like it there. It really does make a difference. So you can hear, this is with it. This is without it. I'll put it back in. So to me, it adds just a little bit of, it's more warmth, it's a little louder. There's a certain roundness and a bottom end, and that's why I choose the Oxford limiter, because it's just something, has this sort of little X factor with the mix. It gets it loud, I can push it hard, and that kick just gets even bigger. I did something kind of experimental with this. I put transmod actually on the master in a very subtle way. And it's not something that I would do for every track. I would try to use it in a very subtle way, if possible. So on the main mix, I actually have overdrive up. I'm just pushing the ratio up a little bit. I'm not messing with the other controls. As you can hear, it's about like 1.5 dB, maybe even 2 dB quieter when I take it off. So sometimes it's a little bit like playing with fire. You don't want to go crazy with it, because when you solo elements, it'll trigger that transmod when you're soloing tracks. But when your song is done and you really just want to add that little extra bit of juice, I'll either put, you know, an inflator on it, or I'll put transmod. Those are my 2 choices before the limiter, to kind of get a little more volume in there, since I'm not using a compressor on the mix. So that's without, and then with. And that's how I use my Sonnox plugins.